I want to open the show by thanking my guests for their flexibility in scheduling. People who have been watching Crowdsource the Truth since this morning have seen the Freedom Watch Citizens Grand Jury, and that delayed the normally scheduled program with Scott Bennett, and we're joined today by John Carman. Gentlemen, how are you?
Doing well, Jason.
Good to see you both. Something weird going on with one of my cameras there. So everybody was watching with great interest. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people saw the debates last night. Gentlemen, it seems like just yesterday that the Democrats in Congress were busily telling us that there was no border crisis, that this was manufactured by President Trump, but yet there was a lot being said about it in the debates, and there was a whole lot going on in Congress. The focus seems to be on allocating resources, funds, personnel, and housing to people that don't live in this country and come in here crossing the border in a way that is presently illegal. I didn't hear any conversation about how the government is taking care of whistleblowers like Scott Bennett and John Carman, or other Americans who are, for instance, unable to survive on their salaries. Guys, what do we think about this latest situation?
Well, I just would start it off by saying the debates last night are of course, far to the left, because that's the typical Democrat process. You have the candidates vying for the majority vote in the Democrat Party, so they have to be anti-Trump, they have to be pro-immigrant, they have to be, LGBT rights and socialized medicine and all of those aspects. And of course, they'll come away from that side as we inch closer to the general election in November of 2020. But to be honest with you, in evaluating all of the candidates, of course, I was not surprised to see that Tulsi Gabbard was voted essentially to have won the debate. Right. And she was the most Googled name of people that watched it. So they were interested in her. She struck a chord. And of course, it's going to be determined by the middle of the road voters in 2020. And quite honestly, I think Tulsi Gabbard is the one that walks away as the most calm, serene, placid, yet also very, very solid on foreign policy. And, I think she will not be perceived as an extremist, as a leftist, as an angry shrill with fingernails down a chalkboard and angry at the world and full of venom and revenge or stupidity, like Beto O'Rourke and his long spider daddy long legs arms and his bad accent. Let me just tell you, I speak Spanish fluently, and when I speak, I sound like a Castilian from Spain. Cuando yo puedo hablar en español, yo tengo un acento como una persona de la país, del sur de América o España. Esto cabrón no sabe cómo decir español.
It seemed very forced to me what they were doing with
sorry,
having.
I have to laugh. I'm laughing in Spanish too.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Did it seem forced to you guys that Beto O'Rourke was speaking in Spanish?
He's just an infantile idiot who's never grown up. I mean, to think that that's going to win him votes. I mean, he really is just. He's a punk. He's a kid who's got no gravitas. That's the thing. He's barely lucky to make. I don't know what he could run for. I wouldn't vote for him. He's like a class president in high school. He's not presidential material in the United States. But,
yeah.
I think all of them are jockeying for their future political retirement check. So they have to stay relevant. The only one who's really serious, I think, about the presidency in leading the country is Tulsi Gabbard. All the other ones kind of seem to be doing it for personal aggrandizement and power. But I'll defer to John to give his seasoned review.
That's interesting. I like your Spanish, Scott. Estás muy bueno.
Yeah, gracias.
My Spanish is a little bit more border Spanish. ¿Dónde vas que trae de México? Habla cahuela, or pongo sus manos arriba, no se mueva, as I have my gun out. Thing.
That's right. That's right.
But I heard this guy speaking out, and I go, well, he sounds like he's a typical American, maybe trying to attempt to speak, and that's okay as long as you're doing it. Yeah. Even the Hispanics or Mexicans I've dealt with, You know, they'll conjugate it for you if you say the wrong term or something.
Yeah.
But I was watching that 2-hour hearing yesterday for this show, specifically so I could talk on some details. And believe me, I could shortcut it. But they were talking about the same thing. And I was watching as Ron Johnson, who's the chairman of this board, of this hearing, they invited a Border Patrol supervisor, a customs guy, and some other office desk jockey guy that worked out of New York, who keeps claiming that he's been there for just about 3 decades. I said, well, why don't you just say 25 years or 27 years or whatever? No, he wants to embellish, and his weakness is he doesn't have enough man marbles. ¿Cómo dice man marbles in Espanol? Huevos de
hombre.
Yeah, something. But it's like, and I'm being facetious because I know more than what I'm telling. But it's just this guy is so effeminate. And then when they're asking these questions, they finally put up the picture that they didn't post on the internet. And I had to look it up on a Google search. I said, you know what? I've seen this and it's bad. But Ron Johnson, who is still a senator, like a lot of these other senators, and there's a few people that do have a lot of huevos, maybe even some of the females have better ovaries.
Oh.
They exhibited more feeling and stuff. But the point was, I empathize with the death. I empathize with it. But Johnson was practically in tears. I was looking at him carefully. I go, wait a minute. His face suddenly was flushed. He started to quaver at the lips a little bit, and I thought he was going to cry. His eyes were turning red like he was getting ready to cry. And I go, what's going on here? I'm not supposed to see that. That's a professional. He's not. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And then I went over and took some notes to a couple other guys and women senators. Portman Langford out of Oklahoma. James Langford. And then Senator Hawley, and then another Senator Scott. Some of them had some good points. The children are being used by the drug smugglers, which is true. And the mantra for the day, and I think you've probably mentioned it before, is bring a child and get in free, and after a couple of weeks, they set you free, BS, because of the asylum procedures.
Yeah.
These guys don't know what they're talking about. They're mixing apples and oranges. They're trying to put the pressure on these guys on the hearing, and they're not even out of the Southwest region. They're out of the East Coast somewhere. And I go, wait a minute. They're talking about San Ysidro, Calexico, places I've actually worked.
Yeah.
And they're talking about the stats and all this, and they go, well, we'll have to get back to you on that, Senator. We don't have that stat, or we don't know, or whatever. But there's like 11,575 people coming in, claiming asylum, coming in illegally or not, but those are the stats that they've mixed. That's a lot of people that they messed up from just 3,000 or maybe 1,300 nationwide.
Let me ask you guys this, though, because here's what I really want to get to, John. I mean, we see pictures like this horrendous image in the Washington Post, and obviously nobody can look at a picture of a parent and a child drowned, dead, and think anything other than that's horrible.
If it's real.
Well, before we even go there, let's presume that this is in fact real. It is highly politicized because we don't know what the situation this family is escaping in whatever country they're escaping from. But what about the people, Scott, who are in San Francisco, who are living in squalor and dying in their own filth and of their own diseases and don't have money for health insurance and don't have safe neighborhoods and are worried about drug crime? Right here in the United States, we've got Democrats who are so worried about people who are citizens of the world. And I'm not saying we want to turn our backs on them, but aren't we turning our backs on the citizens of the United States? There are limited resources that we have.
And those resources are provided by the tax dollars, the hard work, sweat, blood, and tears that the American citizen puts into the coffer at the end of each day, at the end of each week. And the government of the United States has been created by the people, for the people, and through the people to serve the people of the United States, not to serve any other people on planet Earth. And not from Mexico, not from San Salvador, not from Honduras. None of these countries, no person matters more than a person in the United States of America. All of this nonsense about refugee status. That refugee law was made back when you had communist dictators like Pol Pot and all the rest of them killing and slaughtering and doing bad stuff. Those days don't exist anymore. So the entire refugee law needs to be scrapped and thrown out. I'd like to see a real leader in Congress do that. I'd like to see President Trump do that. But the refugee law is nonsense. This idea of someone coming over, squatting under a tree and having a kid, and that's a citizen of the United States, that's unconstitutional. You cannot have the citizenship conferred upon you if you are in a state of illegality or invasion in the United States. So you're not a citizen if you're just simply born here. You have to be given the citizenship by your parents. But this whole nonsense about illegals coming over and deserving, you're right. I see San Francisco every day because I work part-time there.
Right.
And it is squalor. There are needles. There are bags of feces. There are people sleeping in homeless indoors, covered with flies.
Well, and you said
beards,
something very important right there, Scott. You said invasion, right?
Yes.
We know that this is a well-known technique. In the Vietnam War, they flooded, the North with Southern immigrants or the South with Northern. They basically wanted to overwhelm local law enforcement with an immigration crisis. So if this is a clandestine invasion where we have this social engineering project underway to make millennials and people who want to vote for Ocasio-Cortez or whoever.
The Kalergi plan. The Kalergi
Right.
plan.
They're basically just trying to overwhelm law enforcement, overwhelm the economy, make the average person feel guilty with horrendous images like those of a dying parent and child, and make it everybody's responsibility to, it basically puts the responsibility of some oppressive government in another country on the hands of every person in the United States of America. And it's not to say that I think we should turn our backs on these things, but it's like putting a Band-Aid on a leg amputation. Why aren't we addressing the problems in some of these countries that are causing all these people to flee and come to the United States? And I always come back to, we've got failing economies in our own cities. We've got starving and dying children in our own cities, people who are citizens or recent immigrants. How can we be taking more? People need to kind of embrace this concept that there are limited resources in terms of money, human resources. John, talk to us about what you saw in your time on the border and today, how taxed these resources are in terms of men and women in healthcare and finances to handle it all.
Yeah, let me try to support and back up what Micah just said too.
Scott.
I'm sorry, Scott. Yeah. I got Mike on my mind for some other deal. Dovetailing this together, we are seeing the symptoms of a takeover or an attempted takeover by the Democrats. When they put up that silly BS, and I'm sorry to say this, when they put posters and pictures, you're going to see it. They're going to use it again because they're going to say, oh, this is our poster child. You'll see it on something else. You'll see it on a billboard. But we're experiencing what they call as a Trojan horse type of a maneuver. And I'm sure Scott knows this because of his background in military. And it's a slow type of an invasion where they go, oh, well, we're just going to go a little bit and a little bit more. And if you stick a knife or a needle and you're getting a vaccination, if they do it really slow, you won't feel it. But if they jab it in, well, yeah, you're going to react and you're going to put defensive antibodies. It's the same thing. But I work the border, and I want to talk to these damn senators and congressmen because they don't work the border. They fly them out. They claim, oh, I was at the border like Sean Hannity. Right. Hey, I was down there. I saw it. I was at the border. He's like the guy putting his fishing pole in a big frozen ice fishing hole, and there's 10 guys trying to catch one fish, and one guy catches it, and they all claim, hey, yeah, but I was there too. Hey, I got a hook too. No, it doesn't work like that. But I fought everything, the smugglers, the political stuff. I've caught human traffickers. I've caught female smugglers threatening to kill babies with their mother, the biological mother of the child, in the car. And as soon as I could see the behavioral analysis and the nervousness and the fear of the mother, she finally blurted out, help me, she's trying to kill my baby. She's threatening to kill my baby. That's good enough for me. I'm not stupid. Boom, cuffed up, walked her off, took the baby and the mother. They're okay now.
Right. So when we hear about it in Congress, John, they want to blame people like you. guys who are working the border, and it's a very difficult job. We don't know who's bringing these children over and for what purpose.
It's deeper than that. I did a 2-hour lecture years ago. I put it from VHS to DVD. I sent a copy to a guy that you may know, a congressman up in Palm Springs in 1998. Sonny Bono, kind of ring a bell. I mean, I'm saying it facetiously, but within 7 to 10 days he was killed, and people say, "Oh, it was a skiing accident." No, it wasn't. I was disclosing some serious disclosures about what really goes on at the border, including the fact that they will not only kidnap your child to use it to get across the border, they'll kidnap children at a shopping mall or a supermarket, cut them open, put drugs in them, sew them back up, put the clothes back on properly, and smuggle them in pretending to be asleep.
Wow.
Okay, that was a heartbreaker right there. And yet we're worried about this other stuff. Yeah, I'm worried, and I'm compassionate too. But that's why I was doing a job at the border to catch the bad guys that did come through. And yet people are saying, well, you know, what do you need from us? What do you want? We need support by the Congress. They're failing. Congress is the blame right now. They're not supporting. We need 10,000 agents at the border, at the southern border. We need another 5 to 10,000 at the northern border that they don't want to talk about. Air, land, sea, tunnels, submarines, parachutes, drones, you name it. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. But
you know, Jason, let me make a quick comment on Senator Ron Johnson to give you some background on these guys. Senator Ron Johnson is a piece of garbage. I communicated with him directly about shell game and all the terrorist financing. They connected me with one of his investigators, a guy named Ben Johnson, and I talked to him for hours about all of this stuff, expecting to be brought in to testify. It was because another military whistleblower had been persecuted. He understood and got all of it. And nothing happened. No phone calls back, no invitations. I've got it all recorded on Skype. I put it up on YouTube. It's probably one of the reasons YouTube took down my page, but I've got everything backed up. And the same for Lankford, that redheaded Oklahoman fancy boy. I called into there, and he says, "Don't put him through," in the background. I heard him, and Kathy Rubio and a bunch of people were on the call. He says, in the background, "Don't put him through." So I don't know what they know about my name, but it sure as hell rings their bell and scares them. But Ron Johnson's a piece of garbage, and I'll tell it to his face, and I'll tell it to Lankford. So when I see these guys, they're either cowards, incompetent, or they're deep state agents that are putting on plastic faces and bleached teeth, pretending that they're leaders. But any man who gets up and quavers and cries and looks like he feels your pain. This guy's an effeminate piece of garbage that has no business serving in the United States Congress. This is a war, an invasion. It's troubling. It's sad when you hear about these horrific stories of human smuggling. I'd put a bullet right between the guy's head if I saw anybody bring up with a baby that had been cut open with drugs inside of his body. But this is a very serious, deadly game. And if we don't stop it with absolute crushing totality and conviction and absolute uncompromising dedication to stopping this, we're going to have floods of people from every country, Bangladesh, Cambodia, South Africa, Nigeria, everywhere coming to this country, and we're not going to tolerate that.
Well, it's not even a matter of
those people are being coached too, by the way. I had to interject that because
no, you're right.
These attorneys are telling these people south of the border, yeah, you need to go in. Here's what you say. Here's how you say it. I want political asylum, or I'm a refugee. They are coached into this stuff, and I'm right on top of this with Scott here because I'm going, wait a minute. I tried to contact the very same people. I've got emails to this guy Johnson. Is it Ben Johnson? Are they related? Are they related? Maybe, I don't know. But I've had the same experience years ago when I was trying to get in touch with Chuck Grassley and some other guy named John. And I notified them, and they didn't respond to my documentation. And I was giving them documents and copies of documents. I've got a binder that's like 3-inch thick that I gave the U.S. Attorney and the FBI. And the FBI is just like rolling his eyes because it means he's going to have to work.
That's right.
They copied every page. They're all numbered. They gave it back after about a week. I had extra copies, but that was during the Clinton administration. Amalia Mesa, U.S. Attorney, who's now a judge, big D after her name in parentheses, right? Same thing with another U.S. attorney, Lori Duffy, if I said it right. She's also now a local judge, and some other people. That's how they reward these Democrats,
Yeah.
and they put this stuff through. But God bless you, Scott, because you're going through the same stuff, and I went through the same people, and I'm going, hey, how come Johnson doesn't return my call? And I talked to Sarah.
Yeah.
Is it Sarah? And I put it through, and I said, look, you guys haven't called back. And then other people said, well, we're going to call you back. We were going to call you back, and blah, blah, blah. No. So I know what's going to happen now. I'm going to pressure him some more to make more calls. But I was hoping to hear something good. But as soon as I picked up on that, and then you confirmed it about Johnson, I'm kind of wondering about one of these other guys. And I thought, oh, shoot, maybe Langford, because I'm from Oklahoma, right?
Yeah,
No,
damn good.
Well, see,
you know, the other thing to remember, we've said it before, you can prosecute these congressmen and senators for misprision of a felony because you are giving them felonious activity and demanding that they act in their congressional constitutional oath-swearing capacity to present this to a court of law and a judge. And if they fail, you are going to prosecute them for misprision of a felony, and you put them on notice in writing, and then you can go down to the court and file that action. The other thing I was going to say, I remember when you were talking about the attorney getting, not working, it spurred a memory, and I remember this. Brad Birkenfeld, the Swiss banker who was over in Switzerland, when he brought over all of his information, all of his documentation about the Swiss banks and terrorist financing and offshore banks, he went to the Department of Justice and he tried to dump all this stuff on Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer's staff, and his lawyer had said, this is the key information that will make your career because it exposes all of the terrorist financing. And this U.S. attorney, I think it was a woman at the time, just kind of, actually there's a few people, but one of them said, oh, great, rolls her eyes, tosses her head. Oh, great, just what I need. Another case that's going to make my career in this flippant, arrogant, dismissive attitude.
And Birkenfeld has now been paid off and sent to Geneva, right?
Yeah. And another U.S. attorney slammed his fist down on the table when Brad said, well, I need to get this to the military. I need to get this. And the U.S. attorney in Obama's administration slams his face down. His name was, I'll have to remember it, slams his fist down and says, you won't talk to anybody about this.
Wow. And
then they prosecuted him for it. But he got out of that office and said, to hell with you. And he went to Brad was tenacious. He went to the IRS, the SEC, then he finally got a subpoena at the Senate. But the Department of Justice said, you will not talk to anybody about this. And they were desperately trying to make, why? Because Eric Holder and Lanny Brewer worked for the law firm that represented Union Bank of Switzerland, and that law firm is Covington and Burling, and that law firm has just been fired from representing General Michael Flynn because their whole operation was designed to cover this up. So all of
now
this
let's talk about that, because both of you guys have law enforcement backgrounds and you've dealt with investigations and things like that. What you've just described, Scott, we can't dismiss that behavior as simple incompetence or the department is overwhelmed. This is an active, you're describing active measures to cover up information that you're bringing forward. This is the same thing that John experienced with this Heinrich overflight list and various other elements of corruption that he spent years revealing. Let me just say this before we carry on. It's important, one of the reasons I brought you guys together is that you're both whistleblowers who have exposed corruption in your various areas that you have operated in, and these are very high-level areas. In Scott's case, of course, he wrote the book Shell Game, and he blew the whistle on terrorist financing connections between the State Department, the Union Bank of Switzerland, CIA, DIA, NSA, all of our clandestine agencies and contractors to them. John, of course, has the website customscorruption.com, and he's posting copious evidence and information about the various individuals within the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency who were involved in this corruption. And instead of receiving the help and assistance we would all hope our congressional representatives are there to provide us with, both of these gentlemen have gotten the shaft. So it's important that people who are watching go over to patreon.com/John_A_Carman, or patreon.com/shellgame and sponsor both John and Scott. Whistleblowers like these guys, they need our support because they are not getting the support from the government. In fact, I was thinking about both of you when I was watching the debate and that congressional hearing where they're arguing about how much money they're going to allocate to helping people from every arbitrary country in the world who are down on their luck and are living under oppressive conditions, who don't have enough money for their own health care and their own food. But they're not having a conversation about how they're going to help individuals like you two, veterans of the various services that keep America strong and keep Americans safe. I found it very upsetting.
I want that book too. The Shell Game book is an excellent book, not to plug Scott's book, but it's an excellent book, and if it's any indicator of how he talks and how he explains things. Where's my book, Scott? You got my address, right?
I'll make sure I send you a copy, brother. I promise.
But I was going to interject a comment was overt act. You know, it's like James Comey when he was testifying. Well, we couldn't prove intent on Hillary because, well, you know, we couldn't prove it. It's not a requirement that you prove intent, and yet you're coming across the same people. We both quote the same law, which is very rarely used and well known: misprision of felony, misprision of treason. I suggest people Google it, please, because that's all you have to tell them. And when you tell U.S. officials, like I have also, the example is, oh my God, how did you know about that? Or, well, where did you get that law? It's in there, and yeah, you're responsible. And we could arrest. How many is it? 60,000 indictments that they're alleging people going to Gitmo BS. I go, really? You know, I'm waiting. But yeah, it's the same thing. But,
well, you know, you could also arrest these people who are giving the counseling, John, that you're referring to, and giving the counseling to the illegal aliens that are coming up from the border, these Democrat, leftist, communist lawyers who are down there telling them what to say. I would charge them with aiding and abetting the illegal entry of an alien into the United States. It's a misdemeanor, but they can be charged, and let the jury decide and say you are aiding and abetting the illegal entry of an alien into the United States, fraudulently claiming asylum, fraudulently claiming refugee, but it's all a scam, a fraud.
Yeah, I think it's properly a felony, but double check. But if two or more people get together to violate any law, that's conspiracy. That's a felony.
There you go.
If they go down there purposely to tell these people and coach them, and they get two people together, that's a felony. Whether they come across illegally as an alleged misdemeanor, not if they violate the law. It's a difference on the state law. If you intend to burglarize a business, like let's say somebody intends, I'm going to go into 7-Eleven and steal a pack of gum, he's already committed a crime of with willful intent. If he goes in, that's burglary. He's trespassing. If he actually does it, then it's a felony burglary. So it goes from one thing to another. But people don't get it because they didn't go to school and study law,
right?
And they're not law enforcement or attorneys.
Now, gentlemen, Scott
that's the
has.
advantage.
Thank you very much for that insight, John. Scott has only a limited amount of time, and I apologize that we had to move the schedule around. So I do want to just direct you guys to one more general question, and then, John, you and I can get more involved in the border and all that sort of stuff. When the maniacs, I mean the Democrats, had their debate last night, there was a lot of talk about Iran, what's going on with Iran, and I mean it's so politicized, the border, and it was like an anti-Trump rally. I agree, Scott, that Tulsi Gabbard came off well compared to the other candidates. There was a lot of conversation about gun control. They were there in Florida, they were talking about all the school shootings. They kept talking about assault rifles and purchasing bullets and concealing weapons and the Second Amendment. No one spoke at all about the other common thread in all these school shootings, which are these psychoactive, or what do you call them, these mental health related drugs that all of the shooters have been utilizing. Lots of calls to do things relative to guns and gun companies and the sale of guns. I didn't hear a single one of them say anything about investigating pharmaceutical companies and deciding
very good point.
Who can prescribe this stuff to who.
That's an
Yep.
excellent point, Jason. And it comes down, the candidate of the Democrats should say, look, everybody has a right to keep and bear arms. And that's the best way to defend yourself against these psychotropically delusional, crazy people is to shoot them dead when they come at you or your kids or something. Now, how do we stop them from shooting and getting guns? That's a complicated question. But you can't stop them from stripping the rights or making more difficult for good people to act as deputies and protection and sheriffs, if you will, in your own communities. That's what the Democrats hate because they want absolute power. Democrats by nature are fascist tyrants that want to oppress people and control people with the force of government. It's a horror that they represent. They always cloak it in flowery language and these emotional slogans of nonsense, but at its heart, they are about fascism and tyranny and crushing abuse. And I think this election is going to be Trump's to lose. He could lose it to only Tulsi Gabbard if she is more anti-war than he is. If Trump is dumb enough to let Bolton get him into a war, then he could be done. I don't think he'll do that. I think he'll stay out. He should get Tulsi Gabbard onto his team, make her his UN ambassador, make her part of his administration. If Mike Pence fell out and she became his vice president, he'd win hands down.
It's just never going to happen with a Democrat vice president on an incumbent Republican ticket. Real quick, before you have to go, Scott, I want to ask, am I the only one who felt a sense that even Tulsi Gabbard, a war veteran and someone with real world experience in the types of things that we all just know that we don't want to get involved in, even it felt like every candidate was afraid to say something along the lines of what I just said. We need to look at all the factors. America, it's important that people have the right to. They kept talking about gun collectors and hunters. They do not want to touch that third rail of the Second Amendment, of the right to keep guns to stave off tyranny. They don't want to talk about that because they are tyrants. They want to control our thoughts.
The only Democrat personality that would win is the type of Alan Dershowitz. He's a Democrat. He always says he's a Democrat. I'm not a Democrat. I've never been one. I never will be. But Dershowitz is a Democrat, and he's mild. And Tulsi Gabbard is a Democrat, and she's mild. All these crazy lunatics who promise the sky are fools, and I think they'll be judged as fools. I hope and pray that they put one of those knuckleheads up to run against Trump because it'll guarantee he wins. I hope and pray they put up Biden, and they bring up all of his misgivings and his sexual abuse and attempted abuse of young kids and his son's corruption in Ukraine and all of the crimes they're involved with. I'd love to see the Democrats throw up their most toxic fool as a candidate and not let Tulsi Gabbard in. I'd love for them to tar and feather Tulsi Gabbard because then she'd go right into the Donald Trump team in some capacity. She could be an independent. She could be a Democrat. Remember, Clinton brought in Cohen, I think it was, or Obama brought in Cohen as his Secretary of Defense, and he was a Republican. So Tulsi Gabbard could have a very balancing effect on the cabinet. But it's always an honor to be with you, Jason, because you are the only one, and your Crowdsource the Truth is the only channel that addresses these things from a very ambassadorial, diplomatic, let's look at both sides and be completely honest. And that's what I admire about you. You are strong and confident enough to be completely honest, as John Harman is.
And thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that, Scott.
That was for him, and then you threw me in there. So, okay.
No, I appreciate it very much. And Scott, thanks for shifting your schedule around to be with us this afternoon. People should definitely go over and visit shellgamewhistleblower.com, purchase Scott's book, Shell Game, and you can read all about how he was railroaded right into jail where he met Brad Birkenfeld, revealed stunning information about the connections between international banking, our clandestine agencies, contractors to those agencies, and terrorist financing, including financing of events like 9/11, individuals like Dov Zakheim. There's a lot in that book, and I hope that people will go over to patreon.com/shellgame, sponsor Scott on Patreon. While you're there, sign up and sponsor John by going to patreon.com/John_A_Carman. Carman. Scott, thank you for joining us. We'll speak to you again next week. John, please stay with me and we'll continue talking about all this stuff. It's the perfect time, really, for people to sign up on Patreon, John, because there's been a lot of attention now paid to this investigation that Project Veritas has been doing into the censorship on YouTube. So the type of information that you've brought forward, you've described to us how, congressional representatives, they just ignore it. Tell us some more details, John. You've had some great insights about this congressional hearing yesterday where they were speaking to the various border agents. To the average person watching this, they weren't able to glean as many details from it as you were. Give us your overview on this hearing and what is it that we need to do moving forward? Finally, it seems like Congress is engaged on this point. They've acknowledged that there is a crisis. What's your view here?
Yeah, I was just looking to remind myself, there's a picture of Brad, I think, Hastings testifying. He's Border Patrol. He didn't even have his badge on right because the badge goes above the pocket area and he's got it hanging below from the pocket down below, which is not a proper uniform. I go, wait a minute, does this guy know what he's doing?
Wow.
But they got a Border Patrol guy, then they put a Customs guy in the middle, and then they put another guy who was out of New York. HSI, which is the equivalent of the new investigative branch of Department of Homeland Security.
Oh, yeah.
So they're coming up with all these acronyms like, oh yeah, that's like Internal Affairs, or that's like another branch where they're doing investigations. But these guys are talking from a different level that I actually worked. So when they talk to congressmen and senators and civilians, they don't get half of the material. They're barely catching a few things. These guys are on the streets, but they, unfortunately, from the East Coast, they weren't from a West Coast southern border area where I worked for 15 plus years. And they're actually quoting information and stats from their databases that they're given every day type of thing. So it's like, well, we'll have to get back to you on this stat. We'll have to get to this. But they're mentioning San Ysidro, which is the largest land border port that I worked, right across from Tijuana. And then you got Otay Mesa, and then over to there you got Calexico, and in between you got Tecate and Campo, but Calexico's in the desert. But why do you think Trump and DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen came to San Diego District? Well, I was bugging them for 30 months now. It's been 30 months, and now Nielsen's left.
And have they changed anything, John, based on your input?
No, that's the problem. They're adopting the new fence. That's the first thing. It's like putting a Band-Aid on the problem, but they're not addressing, as you have pointed out, they're not coming up and saying, look, why aren't we addressing the issues with internal corruption? Why are we treating these whistleblowers like myself and Scott the way they did us?
Yeah.
It's two separate parallel paths, the same type of thing. And he did his stuff, and I was exposing my angle from what I saw directly involved, and I reported internal corruption, and yet they're coming down finally, okay, we're going to put up a border fence. Is that good enough? Is that the attitude? Well, here's a Band-Aid. You need another Band-Aid? No, they're not digging in because the Democrats are fighting because that's their money. The money is letting these people, these illegals, refugees, asylees, whatever they want to be called this week, to become in and register, and then they want to lower the registration age to 16. They're doing everything they can.
What does that mean to register, the registration age, lowering it to 16? What's that going to
do? They want to register everybody as Democrats.
Register to vote, you mean? Right. Well, see, that's the thing. We've heard that, and that's what they say, that, the Democrats want to let illegal immigration happen so that all those people will vote Democrat. But what if it's more sinister than that? What if the people who are funding these Democratic campaigns provide the funding on the contingency that this is the platform you're going to go after? And we know, I'm thinking of George Soros, we know he likes to tank nations' economies, so he bets against that economy and he gets rich as the country suffers. Right. One of the tactics that he uses is this type of forced immigration flood that does all the things I've described. They're using social engineering on television and in Congress and in these debates to tug on everybody's heartstrings. They show you a picture of a father and a child dead. That's obviously horrible, but the point of the matter is, what's the mechanism for processing all these hundreds of thousands of people? They just flood in. Where are they going to stay? People don't want to open. I don't want 10 people I don't know living in my apartment. So at a certain point, we need facilities to handle these people. What did you see, John, on the border in terms of these detention facilities? I mean, I can imagine if you've got a facility that's designed to hold 800 or 1,000 people and you have 10,000 people there, you have a problem on your hands that's not immediately clear how you solve it.
Right. Well, again, I was with U.S. Customs. I was cross-trained immigration. Border Patrol is the other agency that works outside the ports of entry. That does not mean I cannot work outside the port of entry. It just means they're predominantly handling more at the detention facilities. When we catch them at the border, it's a smaller percentage unless they do a bonsai run. Then Border Patrol catches them in between the ports of entry. So as you're looking at this picture that you put up on your screen, those people are taken to a special facility by immigration deportation officers. Then they're handled by special transport officers, a different category of Border Patrol. Then they're taken care of as if they're in prison or not. They get 3 meals a day. They get a cot. They get whatever, medication or whatever. They're taken care of until they get to their hearing, which could take 8, 9 months to a year. Now they're figuring out we're being flooded. All these rumors about FEMA camps start to come to mind. I go, wait a minute, they're all afraid about FEMA camps a couple of years back and afraid that they're going to go out and detain American citizens and put them up in FEMA camps. And I've had actual whistleblowers tell me, no, there's no such thing happening, but they're training people even as far as going down to Gitmo, getting them ready, and they're upgrading their facilities, is what I've been hearing through my intelligence contacts. So I'll give you an example. They detain somebody at San Ysidro, they lock them up after they've already patted them down, searched them for contraband. It's an immigration case in this particular sample. And then they put them in a locked up facility in a room, but they're supposed to take away the shoestrings off of their shoes if they have shoestrings. They're supposed to take away belts, scarves, or anything that could be used to harm themselves. And then you find somebody later that wasn't checked on every half hour to an hour who tied shoestrings around his neck and attached it to the doorknob or even a small bench or something. It's just enough to cut off the supply, pass out, and then they
go to the hospital.
Terminate.
Oh,
no,
they're killing themselves. Why do they kill themselves in there coming all the way to America?
No, because they got caught, for one thing. Their situation is a lot worse than what you can imagine. I've caught people smuggling. They immediately put their head down and just like, oh, shoot, they're going to go to jail for the rest of their lives. They know. It's body language. Some people get caught smuggling. That's what they're going to go to jail for. They can't handle prison, or they've been there before, or some other desperate thing. It's not what you think. The general public does not know. So that's just one sample. There was a guy held by DEA recently, about sometime last year ago. So Asian American guy, they detained him, put him in a special facility locally in San Diego, put him in a locked up jailhouse detention room, and they supposedly stripped him of anything that could have been used against him. They always do that. They make sure that they switch you up, put you in other clothes, or they may detain you in regular clothes, take the belt, take the shoestrings, take anything sharper, anything can be used. The guy was in there for days, and they weren't feeding him, or they didn't get him water or something. Ooh. He could have died within 24 hours of that.
Yeah.
You can only go without food for several days, and then water, you have to have water within at least 72 hours, or you're going to start to die or whatever.
Oh, yeah. I would think less than that.
So somebody checked him out, and he ended up getting $1 million, $2 million compensation, but it doesn't matter what they detain him for. They still have to give you humane treatment. I've been trained on that stuff. I've been through it myself. I know what they're supposed to do. I know how to treat people.
I think everybody wants to treat people with humane treatment, but it just seems like they're politicizing this situation, first to say there is no border crisis, Trump has made that up, then to make it like Trump is snatching children and throwing them in prison. Ocasio-Cortez even called these concentration camps. But you know, we're talking about a facility that's being totally overwhelmed. You're saying there's a high enough incidence, and we've heard from many others, high enough incidence of kidnapping that we cannot just assume that someone trying to cross the border with a child is necessarily that parent. So there's got to be a process for making that determination. One of the things that came out in this hearing was that it was like $20 or $200 per DNA test, and they're doing these DNA tests to determine if the child is with the proper parent. Well, that takes time. I mean, when you really start to break down this process of what needs to be done when a person with a child comes to the border, even if we want to grant them asylum, you can't just let every person in. What if they've got a disease? What if they've got a bomb? What if they, you know, so you check them out, you do all this stuff, but they're trying to politicize it and make it just this anti-Trump thing. Cheyenne is asking, or rather stating, that she wants to see all immigration halted for the time being. And I have to tell you, when I was watching the hearing yesterday, I thought about that. What if they just put a temporary furlough on immigration and said, look, we acknowledge all the things that are being said, that the United States is made up of immigrants, that all these companies were started by immigrants, and we want immigrants, but our immigration system right now is overwhelmed. If you have an air conditioner at your house that's about to break, sometimes you have to shut it off for a day or two to fix it and then turn it back on. What happens if they do something like that, John? Just total halt on all immigration for a month.
First off, you've got more than one program, so that idea and thought is incorrect.
Can't work.
You don't have one refrigerator working. You've got 6 refrigerators going at the same time, and if you got a garage, you got 5 or 6 other larger refrigerators and freezers going. It's not just one program. We have a refugee program right now that was vetted by the United Nations. And I've already confirmed this with local Democrat Congresswomen Susan Davis, just to give an example, and others in San Diego County alone, that said, oh yeah, they're getting this, they're getting that. And another whistleblower that I can't quote her name, she's already quoted, they come here, they get $6,000 a month, they're getting Social Security cards, and they're getting U.S. passports. Now, when you say U.S. passports, or she said it, that's an incorrect statement, because you have to wait 5 years to take a test to become an American citizen. Unless you went into the military, it takes 2 years. Do you see all the programs? There's all these programs that people are misunderstanding and misstating. Well, we could just stop everything at the border right now. No, there's people who have been waiting for 5 to 10 years already that have already been vetted through the proper procedures. They need to keep going. And yet we've got people that are coming in under this Trojan horse idea that the Democrats are pulling in. They're giving you so many fiasco decoys. Oh, yeah, we got children at the border. We got people dying at the border. They got people coming through Canada. They got people coming from every country coming in. And, oh, yeah, they have the ones that are being vetted by the United Nations. Right. So it's not just one program. It's several programs at the same time. And you got waivers. You got the presidential waivers. You got executive privilege waivers. And you got special visas that are all throughout the whole program. If you pull up U.S. immigration passport visas, A through Z. I mean, everybody knows what an H-1B1 is. Oh, you could sponsor a person if they're technologically proficient in a computer program, and we'll bring him in if your guy pays $100,000 to endorse him to a local government facility or a private company that's going to contribute to a U.S. program in defense work or something. You know, that kind of thing. That's just one program right there. So there's like 50 to 100 programs. Nobody understands unless you work inside, and
so all this other thing that you said, John. The other thing that you said is that we don't, I constantly confuse what your role was as customs versus border, and there's USCBP. Do you think that part of the problem maybe is that we have so many agencies, so many bureaucracies, there's got to be overlap and waste? What is the comprehensive, let's say Donald Trump called you tomorrow and said, John, I've gotten 1 million of your emails. I'm very sympathetic to the fact that you have lost your Social Security, you've lost your pension. We're going to hire you to be the director of what? Homeland Security. What would you do? What would you change tomorrow to improve this situation?
Well, we have to move the funding around towards U.S. Customs and the border fencing, which is a non-agency, non-partisan type of an issue. It's a national security issue. And when Tom Ridge came in years ago with Chertoff following behind, all he did was take all the agencies and throw them in a bowl, stir it up, and walk away, and called it Homeland Security. And I said that was the stupidest mistake, because they don't share information, even in original stuff. Department of Justice doesn't talk to Treasury. Treasury doesn't talk to the other three-lettered agencies because of what we do. U.S. Customs is the ultimate agency at the border, period. Then we are cross-trained and designated immigration, so we can go, okay, yeah, your passport looks good, you can go. Otherwise, everybody would be referred in to talk to another agent from another agency just to get through the border, just to come through the airport every time. That's too much. So we're cross-trained up to 40 different agencies. That's a lot. But Immigration Customs. Now, Border Patrol on the outside of the ports of entry, they handle mostly illegal immigration. Then they cross-train them DEA so they can get the drug stuff at the same time, fill out the paperwork, know how to do a seizure, process it. It still goes through a stupid U.S. attorney who interprets, was that a good seizure? Was that a good deal? And then they supposedly will do a prosecution if they do their job. But 9 times out of 10, I've run into guys that didn't. But not one of my cases, this is for the record, not one of my cases ever got kicked back when I was at U.S. Customs, because they were all good. I wrote excellent reports. I put lots of details in. That's what they didn't want. See, that's what they're trying to do, is stretch it out and play games with it and charge taxpayers more money. So they need to streamline, cut down on a lot of the procedures, hire more people, about 10,000 like right away, because if you got, let's say you have 10,000 people on the border working 1 8-hour shift, daytime, right now. Well, that means you have to have a night shift. That's another 10. Well, what about midnight to 7 in the morning? That's a third shift, or an overlap in between to cover both shifts at nighttime, so that they're not inundated with a bunch of illegals or drug smugglers or contraband
at
coming
whatever hour, yeah.
Exactly. So when you get these people on primary busy, like I used to be very much busy, because I'd get a lot of seizures, that means somebody else had to take my lane, or if I was out in Border Patrol territory, somebody else had to take over for that guy's position. So they would move senior positions at the rear, and as soon as the junior guy got something, they had to move another person in, and then lastly, the senior person would take over, so that they've got 3 levels of people taking to rotate to take care of all those people that came through, or the drugs, or the contraband, or whatever seizure they're doing. So it's very complicated, but it doesn't take a brain surgeon. You got people who, get this, you have to get this part. This is what the audience needs to hear. The government people, like at port and district director levels, get money when they save money. When they cut back, they get $10,000 cash awards at the end of the year thing. I used to get cash awards because I had outstanding arrests. I had outstanding drug seizures. I'd get, there's a $10,000 cash award, or a $1,000 cash award, or a QSI promotion within thing. That would be
What's
good.
QSI?
Quality step increase, which is good, because I should have been given a dozen of those at least. I should have been a 13 or 14 or whatever by the time I even fished my 5th year. But the way they've got these things going, district directors and port directors will steal suggestions, like myself, for instance, that I submit a lot of suggestions to upgrade and improve things. The license plate readers, the radiation detection devices to detect radioactive bombs and so forth. Those guys would get cash awards if they took my information, submitted it without my name, and they would get credit. They would end up getting money. But the port directors and the district directors, I swear to God, they cut back on stuff just so they make guys work themselves to death, and then they get money at the end of the year because they're showing, you gave us $10 million to work at this particular district. Well, I cut back the funds to 1/3 of that, or 1/2 of that. So they're saving money. Well, that guy gets money in his pocket because he saved the taxpayers several millions of dollars. They're cutting our own throats because we need the money to get high-tech equipment, the fencing, the X-ray machines, the special mobilization,
Which is more
bulletproof
agents even.
vehicles. Yeah, more agents alone. It takes time to train these people. You got a 19-week academy, so that's about 3 to 4 months. By the time you finish all that, they still have to go through actual on-the-job training and experience. So by the time you get a seasoned veteran like I myself, and I've been called that, so that's why I'm using the term, then those people get moved around and put in special positions so that they can help clench and clutch off the rope, or put a rope to the noose of the people coming through, or the drugs, or the threat, the national security issues, however you want to interpret the terminology on it. And yet they're not doing it. It's like a sieve. It's a sieve. That's a common comment that we've made for years. The border is like an open sieve. You just put water through a sieve and it just pours out through all the little holes in the system. Well, they still haven't done it at the northern border, and they've even put virtual customs reporting cameras and voice boxes at the border. So if you walk through and you see this machine on a pole, like a call box when you're stranded on the highway, when they used to have call boxes.
You just walk up to it and admit that you're entering illegally and you have contraband.
Yeah. Well, or you're a U.S. citizen, you got your passport with you or something.
Right.
You go, you look, my car got broken down. I happened to see, I came through. I'm here right now. I'm reporting in, so that you're not going to get arrested by Border Patrol or Customs up the road about 1,000 yards or something. And it's got a virtual camera with an LED on it. It's got a voice box, and then you actually get an actual inspector or an agent at the end of it, if and when you have to activate it or not. And it may activate on its own because you've already set off sensors just walking through. But that type of technology is put out there just to test it and see if it works, and it does up to a point. But the thing is, you still don't have a human being out there like myself who's got the training to evaluate you and look at you and go, is this guy a threat? Is he carrying contraband? He or she, doesn't matter what their citizenship is. Can they answer all the questions? And if it looks like it's normal, have a nice day up the road. You know.
Exactly. Well, John,
But
we're
that's
just
one
about
idea.
We're just about out of time for today. I want to thank you for joining me again. And for people who are maybe just seeing you for the first time today, they can go to your website, customscorruption.com. John's got a load of information on there about his time in the U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency. John's a whistleblower, of course, and he's spent many, many years of his career pointing out serious corruption in some of these agencies, and for that, he has been given the shaft. It's really super important that viewers of Crowdsource the Truth support the whistleblowers who come forward to speak to us. You can go to patreon.com/John_A_Carman and become a patron of John's. Show him your support and say thank you for all of the sacrifices that he's made, protecting our borders, protecting our presidents when he was a member of the Secret Service. You can see all of the interviews that John and I have done, as well as various posts that he's put there on Patreon. And of course, people should sponsor Crowdsource the Truth as well. You can go to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. And don't forget, tonight at 8 p.m., we're going to have the follow-up to Kevin Shipp's investigation and report on the hammer. Kevin will be back for another subscriber-exclusive show on patreon.com/crowdsource the truth, subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth. That is the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp at 7 p.m. Eastern. I want to thank my guest tonight, John Carman. John, wonderful to have you as always. We'll speak to you very soon.
Yes, it's good to be here. Nice to see you and Scott. So I'd say
course.
hello to Kevin, too.
And special thank you to Scott. I thank you for reminding me. People can get the book Shell Game from shellgamewhistleblower.com. And of course, we want people to sponsor Scott as well on patreon.com/shellgame. John, I will speak to you soon. Thanks as always. Thanks everybody for watching. See you at 7 o'clock for the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp.